Sister Henrietta, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Well, it's been almost 20 years since we last met.
Probably 20. Let's go for 20.
20 years.
Just about 20.
It was in Markfield, wasn't it?
Yes.
Now, tell me how did your journey to Islam start? Where was the beginning?
Oh, wow. So I have to go back to my 20s, early 20s. I had what they call the job for life with the Ministry of Interiors in the International Department. And
Here in the UK?
No, I was in Hungary. So I'm originally from Hungary. And I used to work for the International Department. I worked with diplomats, and that was a time when Hungary was thinking about joining the European Union. So we did a lot of projects, and I was exposed to a lot of Western, culture and ideas. And a year before I got the job, I had an accident in the mountains.
You were skiing?
No, we went for a hiking tour. And at night, I was walking in the dark and I fell on a rock.
Subhanallah.
And I woke up 3 days later, didn't remember anything. The only thing I remember, someone was holding my head, then the blood was oozing everywhere. And I woke up in a hospital with no hair, a tube sticking out of my head, and hearing the doctor talking to my parents. And the doctor said to my mother, who was sobbing next to my bed, to say that it wasn't angels who saved this girl. I don't believe in God, but this was God. Because my skeleton nearly went.
This was the doctor saying?
Doctor saying it to my parents, yes. He said, I'm a scientist, I'm a doctor, I don't believe in God, but this was God's work, because this girl could be in a wheelchair for the rest of her life.
It was a miracle.
It was a miracle, and that's all I could hear. And I couldn't make any sense of what happened to me. I don't remember what happened. All I remember is at night slipping off the rock. And next time I wake up, I have no hair and a tube is sticking out from me, and I don't remember anything that happened to me. So I spent the whole week in the hospital recovering. And I had a lot of conversations with the doctor at night because he was looking after me. And I said, explain to me, why did you say that this was not angels? What's the difference? And he said, you are alive for a reason. You have to find out why you are alive. And that's when I started looking. But I didn't know where to go.
But what was the background? I mean, you were born Christian?
So my parents were generation of communism in Hungary. So we never talked about religion. It was no part of our life. Even my grandparents weren't particularly religious. We did the usual Christmas and, Easter, but nothing as religious in our life was ever present. So we never thought about God, ever. Never discussed it. We were not taught at school. It was not allowed. The Russians didn't allow us to learn about religion. So there was zero religion in my life. And when this happened, of course, you can imagine I was quite taken aback by the idea of God. What does it mean? And that's when I started searching and looking. And I went into Eastern religions, Buddhism, Hinduism. I looked everywhere until I had this job. And suddenly I realized that there has to be something more complicated than just doing small things.
It was your job that exposed you to the world of Islam?
In a way, yes, because there was one particular event that we organized within my department. We invited a group of diplomats, and there was a lot of, diplomatic meetings, and I was in charge of organizing all the diplomatic encounters. And one of them called me a couple of days before the event, and he said, I have got some special requirements. And I said, just let me know, and then I will try to meet it. He said, I don't drink. I don't need any escorts, I don't need girlfriends, I don't need pork. Could you make sure that my food is clean? And I said to him,
where do you come from?
Yeah, what's wrong with you? Like, who are you? So when he came, so they put him in charge. I had to be in charge of him. I had to take him around, and I had to be very careful that his food is always clean. He doesn't get any alcoholic beverage. And we started having a lot of conversations, and I loved the way he was talking about family in Islam. He was getting married at the time, and he was telling me about the process, and he was marrying a Moroccan girl, and just loved the way he talked about family. And I really started thinking about, what about my life? I was working 14 hours a day, 16 hours sometimes, living out of suitcase. I can't have a family if I carry on with this job. And then he went back. He was from Holland. And probably a couple of days later, I received the Quran.
From him?
From him, through the post. And of course, I was terrified. I started listening to the Quran. I couldn't hear it. It was some heaviness, some big responsibility fell on me.
Oh, was that a recording?
It was a recording, and he also sent me the actual Quran
The text.
in a paper version, and I felt totally unprepared. Totally unprepared. But what I did, I was very curious. I was always very curious about things. And I said to myself, I need to make some changes in my life. I don't know what it's going to be, but I have to make some changes.
So you realized that this was a very serious matter, but you didn't want yet to commit.
No, I couldn't. I mean, I wasn't particularly impressed the way the media portrayed Muslims and Islam, particularly Muslim women. I had a very bad impression of Muslim women overall. That's all we got in Hungary in the media. So I couldn't be bothered at that point. But after this incident, that when the Quran arrived, I said to myself, let me go and explore. And I actually went to my local mosque. We had a couple of mosques in the area, Turkish, Pakistani.
Was that was in Budapest?
In Budapest, yes. So every Saturday I spent in the mosque, practically. I was not a Muslim at the time, but I went there to learn Arabic. I was fascinated with the language. I did calligraphy. I was hanging out with the local women. And until I started to feel like I need to make some sort of commitment to this because I was spending way too much there. And one evening I was just going to bed, and something prompted me to say, like, if there is a God, I need to ask him to help me. And that night, I dreamt about the Prophet.
Subhanallah.
Peace be upon him. So I went to bed asking the question, what am I supposed to do now? And at night, he came into my dream and he said, don't be scared, come with us. That was the message. I didn't remember anything else. And I woke up next morning and I felt enthusiastic, like I want to understand why is this present in my life. So I went back to the mosque, and as soon as I entered the mosque, there was this Moroccan lady who knew me from before, and she said, why don't you just come and pray with us? I said, I don't know how to pray. She said, just stand next to me, I will show you.
She could tell you were very interested.
Probably she felt something. Some shift was happening already. So then it was June, I remember so clearly. We were standing in the prayer hall, and she said, just follow my moves, and you don't have to say anything. I will lead. It's a silent prayer. It was Asr time. And I was following the movements. And after the first sujood, I put my head, I clearly remember the sun was coming in through the window. It was a beautiful, clean carpet, plush, red, green, beautiful patterns. I put my head down. And in that moment, I felt like the whole world opened. Everything made sense. In that moment. And even today, when I think about this, I miss that feeling of, I felt so connected to something. I didn't know what it was.
That was Hidayah.
Now we know. But at that time, I didn't know. So then I went home, and within 2 days, I made a decision that on my birthday, that's the best gift I'm going to give myself. And I went to the mosque and I took my shahada.
You were still on your job?
I was still on my job.
And what sort of impact did that have on your life? So you entered into Islam, but lost your job.
Yes, I gave up my job. It was a choice.
You chose that?
I had to. I felt there was no way I can reconcile the lifestyle that was required of me to be a Muslim with the lifestyle that was required of me to work with the ministry and within that setup, which is a very...
it's very demanding.
Demanding, but also very soulless. I couldn't find spiritual fulfillment in my job anymore. So I needed to make a serious change. And
what about your parents?
I couldn't tell my parents that I was a Muslim, and I left Hungary after I gave up my job. Everybody was up against me because it was a job for life. But I left and I went to Egypt to study.
Well, you had to explain to your parents why you're leaving.
Well, I didn't tell them why I was going to Egypt. I told them I'm going to travel because I had enough of my job and I was burnt out, which was also true. I had a very demanding 2-3 years with the ministry. I just couldn't sustain myself. So I ended up in Egypt with 2 suitcases, and I started my journey of living with Muslims at the time.
Did you have friends in Egypt at the time?
I had one contact. I was given one contact by a friend, and she said, you go there, this person will look after you. I ended up with a convert family with a Malaysian wife and an English gentleman who were both Muslims. I stayed with them for 1 week, and in that 1 week, I had miraculous encounters with people in Egypt. So Within a week, I had a job with the British Council. I was teaching English in the afternoons, but in the mornings, I had the opportunity to go to school, learn Arabic, memorize Quran, doing all those
MashaAllah, an
things.
excellent arrangement.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, it was amazing. And one afternoon, this English gentleman puts me on the bus and I said, look, I want to go to my embassy. I want to register my passport because I'm alone here. Anything that can happen to me, I don't want to be exposed. So I went to the embassy. And the lady behind, lots of smoke and coffee and, bukra, inshallah, everything is going to happen tomorrow. She said to me, you're very lucky because there is a meeting of all the Hungarian wives who live in Cairo. They are meeting tomorrow. So if you want to come back, you can meet some Hungarian women. So I went the next morning, and from myself, there was only one lady who was covered. I started talking to her, and she turned out to be from the same town in Hungary where my mother went to school.
Oh.
So then we realized that we live very close to each other. Both of us lived in the same area in Cairo. So after that day, every single day, she used to teach me Quran in Hungarian in Cairo. So she was telling me the stories. She was married to an Egyptian. She had her family there with 2 children. And
probably he was a student there.
No, he was an Egyptian man, but she was Hungarian. They met, they were married for 10 years. And no more than that, 15 years. And she was teaching me the Quran.
And those Hungarian ladies, they were all Muslim?
No. They were married to Muslim men, but you could see very clearly that there was a distinction.
But this particular lady was...
She was a practicing Muslim. And she was telling me how she didn't speak a word of Arabic when she arrived. She said, I just went to circles and I picked up one word each week. And now she was fluent in Arabic. Also, she was very well versed in the Quran. She was telling me the stories. So she really brought the Quran alive for me.
MashaAllah.
She taught me how to cook Egyptian food and
Molokhia.
I was doing the molokhia with her. We were spending Eid together. And it was Ramadan as well. So almost every day I had iftar with them.
For how long did you stay in Egypt?
I stayed for 7 months. And then I had that was the time when I had to call my parents and I had to make a decision. What do I do? Do I go back to Hungary with my scarf on my head? Where do I go? And I called my mother and she said, look, I knew you're not going to return because once you leave the house, you don't come back. But where do you want to go? And I said, well, I've got 2 choices. I can go to England because I speak English, or I can go to Spain because I speak Spanish.
And you told them you were a Muslim by then?
And on the phone, I told them. And my mother didn't speak for about 3 minutes on the phone. And,
wow.
And she said, whatever you choose is your life. But don't tell your dad yet. So I didn't tell my dad.
He was a difficult man.
He was very typical Hungarian nationalist who would not take anything different. And as soon as my mom said this to me, I said to Mom, please just tell him that I think he is a Muslim because the village where he's from, that's where all the Muslims were after the Turks. Mom said, I can't do that. You will have to tell him because he will not take it from me. But I said, that's my way with my dad.
So what makes you suspect that his roots were Muslim?
Well, we have got very peculiar Hungarian traditions, which are very Muslim. So, for example, we would make wudu before we go to sleep.
Really?
Yes, my grandmother would wash hands, feet, face.
Not knowing why?
Not knowing why she's doing it. My grandmother was meticulous. Anytime we have guests, she would say, stay with me for 3 days. You don't have to tell me why you are here. I feed you, I clothe you, I give you a home to stay. After that, you can go. It's a very, prophetic tradition. As I said, we make wudu. We are very hospitable to our guests. We don't ask, why they are there. So we have a lot of traditionally deep-rooted. I guess it's to do with the Ottomans because we were under the influence of the Ottomans for 150 years. But we have a very similar culture to Islam. And I remember when I was being taught about how to make wudu, I said to my mother, this is what we do every night before we go to sleep.
Imagine how many people were lost to Islam.
Yes.
They were probably Spain is a prominent example.
Yes.
So this brought you to the UK?
Yes. So I came to the UK, I settled, and I found myself married within a year. And ever since, I have been here. I lived in Spain for a little while, for about 2 years, and I keep going back because that's where I actually find the purpose of, I think I'm getting a sense of that's the purpose of me being a Muslim. Exploring the roots of Islam in Europe and where it came from. And when I lived there with my children, I was there for 2 years. They went to school, Spanish school. I wrote my first book in Spain.
Where did you stay?
We stayed in Ronda, which is a very beautiful mountain village. And that was one of the last fortians that fell when the Muslims fell in Spain in 1492 was the last in Granada, but Ronda a couple of years before. And every weekend, all I did was with my children is we jumped in the car or we went for a walk and we were looking for the influence and the remnants of Islam in Spain, everywhere, Granada, Cordoba, Sevilla. I know every village in Andalusia because I wanted my children to really get in touch with that culture and with that, the roots of European Islam.
Now, it seems to me that your conversion into Islam was so smooth. Or was it not? I mean, you met someone who had an impression on you. You had an accident. You started thinking. You left your country. You went to Egypt. You were enthusiastic about this whole thing. But were there no challenges?
Oh, there are always challenges. I look at it in a way that I believe that an Islam entered my life. It made me look my life as pieces of puzzles. And I think that that's what I always say, that my journey is finding the pieces and starting to put it together. Because every piece makes sense. When I look back now, the fact that my father's origin is probably an Islamic origin, we don't know, but we can suspect. The fact that Hungary was under the influence of Islam and Muslims for a long time, it's, we have a lot of heritage. The fact that I had an accident and I survived, all of these are little pieces. And when we put it together, there is this beautiful mosaic piece that I can call my life. And I think a lot of people don't attend their life. They don't think about, they think, why is it happening to me? Something is wrong with my life. But actually, everything is happening because you are going some direction. So for me, the smoothness of it is, yes, that. But I had the challenges with my headscarf. My father used to pull the headscarf off me when I was praying in the middle of my prayer. He didn't allow me to practice. I had to hide. I was praying in the dark. When I was in visiting my parents, I could not tell them I'm going. He was literally putting pork and alcohol on the table just to annoy me. So there were very personal attacks.
That's when you visited them from the UK?
Yes. And they came to my place to stay with us after I got married. They visited us a couple of times. And there was always a very deliberate, intentional attack on my lifestyle.
He never reconciled?
No, I don't think we did, because he passed away when my daughter was born, unfortunately. So, and until the last minute, he was very much against my lifestyle. My mother, not so much, but my father, yes. And, when you fall out with your parents, it's very painful.
It is.
Especially my dad, who I had a kind of love and hate relationship with my father, and I didn't expect him to hate my religion so much. But he made no secret about this. Whereas my mother was more on the compassionate and loving side. She said at the very beginning, I don't like the choice you made. I don't like the way you look with the headscarf. You look old, you look this and that. And I said, Mom, it's my life. And she was okay with that. Whereas my dad was a staunchly against me. Everything I did, I think there was also slight racism because my husband is not the same background. My husband is from Bangladesh, so my father couldn't reconcile.
That played a role.
That definitely played a role, because when my daughter was born, my father was in Hungary, and the first question he asked my mother on the phone, I heard it on the birth bed. He said, "What's the color of the baby?"
Oh my goodness.
So that's the kind of stuff, it's not just religiously you're struggling, but you're struggling racially. And then another really interesting episode was when my mother really started to probe me about my lifestyle and the choices and all of that. And she said, "Why do you have to look like an old woman with the headscarf on?" And for me, that's denying everything, every right that I had. And I said, "Look, Mom, let's take it this way. You are a feminist." My mother was a feminist. "You are telling another woman that what I'm wearing is wrong. That's not feminism either. So I don't know where you're coming from." But my mother made a fundamental shift after the children were born. She looked at the grandchildren and she said, I will make sure that these kids will always know when to pray, what to eat, what not to pray. She's
Subhanallah.
incredibly respectful. Even now when we travel to see her or she comes to us, when we go to stay with her, she would put all the alcohol away. She doesn't drink much anyway, but she would put everything away.
Out of respect.
Out of respect. And I think that's progress from somebody who has never had this. My father could have never done this in his life. My father would have really struggled seeing me being a Muslim, but my mother was incredibly accommodating. And now when I left my children with her a lot, she was always the one who took out the prayer mat. I have a prayer mat in Hungary. She bought a prayer mat for me because she said, every time you come, I want you to have a prayer mat. So she has tremendous respect. And now, after 20 odd years of being a Muslim, she looks at me and I don't think she's very far from becoming a Muslim.
Let's make dua.
Who knows? Who knows?
Now you're married to a person who is originally from Bangladesh.
Yes.
So you actually entered into another culture.
Mm.
Were there difficulties here, or was that a smooth, kind of integration maybe, or?
Oh, it's never smooth. I think when we talk about intercultural marriages, interracial marriages, I think there's always a challenge. And I remember my mother saying, you will have a lot of trouble. I said, Mom, I will have a lot of trouble with a Hungarian man, so it doesn't really matter. My challenges are different. So firstly, my husband's family is huge. Compared to me having one brother, he has 5 brothers and sisters. It's a big extended family. My kids have about 100 cousins. Most of them they don't even know. So that's, for me personally, was a big challenge. And sometimes still is, living with an extended family where it's not about what individuals want. It's about what's for the unit, what's for the whole family. At the beginning, I made a lot of effort. I learned the language, so I can speak to my mother-in-law, at least on a basic level.
You speak what, Bengali?
I understand Bengali. I learned some of my husband's favorite food. For me, I didn't look at it as a way to take something away from me. It was, I'm adding something to my own self. It's a repertoire of the skills and the things that I do.
You're making an investment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I want my children to be very comfortable with the culture of both my culture and my husband's culture. I want them to be fluent in moving with languages. My daughter speaks 5, 6 languages now because she's always been exposed to these things. And I really want them to be culturally and racially fluid and understand that we are all human beings. It's all the same. And even our food is the same. It's just called different names. Rice and meat, as in every culture, it's biryani, makluba, whatever you call it. But spicing is different, but the essence of it is all the same.
The basic ingredients are the same.
Yes, it's just like with human beings. And I guess with my husband, the other challenge is that he's an extremely public and open book. His life is an open book, and I'm a very private person, so that has thrown up a few challenges, I guess. But 22 years of marriage, I think we can say we have made it. So
now, what about the convert community? Are you a part of that as well? Are you involved?
Well, I was, and I have been, and I'm in and out. I will be honest with you, because I feel, so the first is, when you're a convert, you're always a new Muslim, even though you have been a Muslim for 20 years. They are always calling you the convert, the new Muslim. And I think there is, in the Muslim community, there is this idea of...
The beauty about it is that you never get old.
You never get old. Yes. Yes. But the idea is that I feel like sometimes we are not taken seriously within the Muslim community because we don't speak the Arabic language properly. We don't grow up with the Quran. We don't fast from a young age. So our challenges are very different. And I often feel as an outsider. I remember when I started going to mosques in this country, you go to a mosque, everyone speaks Urdu. I don't belong there. You go to another mosque, everybody speaks Arabic. I don't belong there. Then you go to another mosque where everyone, different languages. And I think as a convert, I feel that integration still hasn't quite happened yet within the Muslim community. That how do we embrace converts. You know, we give them clothes, we give them food, mashallah, everything is wonderful, but there's more to it, looking after our converts. I think it's and I haven't been looked after by the community particularly. I don't hold any grudges against them or anyone, but I think it's an issue within our community that we have to make sure that we look after our converts. It's not just Shahada is the entry into the house. After that, all the challenges. I mean, there are initiatives I know in the country and Europe-wide where they're trying to make this easier and a smoother transition. But I think there's still some work to do around that.
Now, what about your involvement with the history of Muslims in Spain, and what attracted you to this?
It was a quite interesting encounter because I really wanted to write a book about Spain in general, but also Muslims in Spain. I went over for a holiday and I asked my husband to drive a particular place out of Cordoba, and I told him to stop the car, and he thought something was wrong, but I was lying on the grass and I could hear the land talking to me. I was sobbing and he thought something is wrong with me. And I said, no, I just really feel like I need to be here. So we moved over to Spain with my children. My husband couldn't come with us because his life was here. So we made an arrangement that he would visit us. But as soon as
So you actually lived there
I lived there for 2 years. So my kids went to local school and I was working on my book. I was gathering. And the more I studied, the more I realized that how little actually is presented to the world about the real heritage of Muslims in Spain. And I'm talking about 8th century. I mean, when we look at what happened in 8th century Cordoba, it was the light of Europe. We had universities, we had street lights, we had bathrooms, we had more than 900 books in a library. One library, but we had 400 libraries in Cordoba, whereas Paris had about 50 books, and they were so proud of that. So the entire medieval period is portrayed in a such a poor way to the rest of the world that when you go there and you see the splendor of the Alhambra and the mosque in Cordoba, that it really brings it alive for you, that something isn't quite presented to the world. And as I said, I'm a very curious person. I just lifted the veil a little bit and I wanted to see what's beyond. And the more I study, the more I'm convinced that the root of Islam in Europe started from there, but we are not presenting it to the world.
And has your book been published?
Well, I've got I'm writing historic fiction, so it's waiting for publication. It's called The Bookseller of Cordoba, which is taking place in the 8th century Cordoba, 9th century Cordoba. I also have plans to do something about the Alhambra, something in Sevilla. So a series of books about every single city would be a different story, and all the prominent figures in real life would come alive, hopefully, on those pages.
Wish you success, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you.